Chapter 4. Col opened his eyes slowly. Girl was bending over him, white like an angel, except for her chocolate brown face. Where was he? In heaven? Had he died and gone to heaven? He couldn't remember a thing for a moment. Couldn't understand why he was here, or even where he was. He was disorientated, exhausted, still struggling for breath. You're awake at last. The nurse, she was a nurse, smiled widely. Her teeth were the brightest white he had ever seen. Col wanted to smile back, but it was too exhausting. You've just missed your mother. She's been here all the time, sitting by your bed. We sent her home for a rest half an hour ago. While she spoke, she was tucking him in, lifting his wrist, checking his pulse against her watch. Am I still alive? He wanted to ask. He tried to speak, but his mouth was so dry the words just wouldn't come. He glanced sideways and realised he was on a trip. He tried to remember how he got here, but his memory, his brain, something wasn't working. Everyone's been praying for you, you know. The whole hospital, the whole town. She still smiled as she jotted down notes on a clipboard at the foot of his bed. Praying? For me? He thought. He thought he'd said it aloud, but he hadn't. His voice just wouldn't come. The nurse came close and touched his shoulder gently. You're a hero, Col. She walked to the door. I'll ring your mother, but until she comes back, I want you to rest, okay? That's what you need after all you've been through. Complete rest. She closed the door softly behind her, and he was alone. What he'd been through. What had he been through? He looked around the clean white hospital room, at the window and the darkening heavy sky outside. He could see the snow-tipped hills and the icy January fog descending over the town. Something stirred in his memory, something he didn't want to remember. He was a hero. Exhaustion was pulling his eyelids shut. He could feel himself drifting away on an ocean with a hot sun beating down on him, gentle waves lapping at his feet. But as he drifted deeper into sleep, the water grew colder, and he wasn't on a raft anymore, but an ice floe surrounded by icebergs, and the ice floe was tipping and slanting under him, slipping him under the water into a silent world, with reeds and strange underwater creatures tugging at him, dragging him down. He struggled to be awake, to get above the water, away from the faces that floated eerily in front of him. Faces he knew. Strange faces he'd never seen before, drifting towards him through the waving reeds. Now he remembered. He remembered everything. The boy, the ice, and death. Death reaching out to get him, and him only just escaping. Ah! He jumped awake, sweat pouring from him, his breath coming in short, desperate gasps. And he wasn't alone. A boy was sitting on his bed, staring at him, smiling, wearing Scotland team pyjamas. He knew his face, had seen him before wearing a St. Roche uniform. Oh good, you're awake. The boy bounced enthusiastically on the bed. I'm not supposed to be in here. I'll get murdered for coming. I had to sneak in. My room's down there. He pointed somewhere down the corridor. The nurse, she's called Cleo, by the way. Nice, isn't she? Well, she says you weren't to be disturbed, but you had woken up and were going to be fine. He bounced closer to Col and took a breath. Thought you were going to die, Col. Col! This wee snot rag was calling him by his first name as if he was his best friend. I'm Dominic Sampson, the boy whose life you saved. He said it quite dramatically and emblazoned an imaginary headline in the air. Sounds good, doesn't it? He patted Col's arm. You don't say a word. Preserve your strength. I'll do all the talking. Somehow Col didn't think that this was going to be a problem for Dominic Sampson. Mum and Dad are so angry with me. You'd think they'd be happy I was still alive, but they just keep going on about staying away from thin ice, etc., etc. He rolled his eyes. Col wished he had the strength to punch him. If the boy had stayed away from the thin ice, Col wouldn't be here. I mean, I was sure I would be okay. I'm a really good swimmer. A really good swimmer? Now Col really did feel like punching him. He could hardly swim a stroke. But you see, I panicked, and you didn't. You were brilliant, Col, brilliant. You saved my life. Saving Dominic's life was something Col was starting to regret. Dominic edged closer to him. Do you know, some ancient tribes believe that if you save somebody's life, that person belongs to you forever? Col felt a surge of panic. Dominic Sampson was already beginning to get on his wick. Dominic suddenly jumped off the bed. He seemed only ever to bounce or jump anywhere. You, Col, you're my hero, and my life is yours now. You ask anything of me, and I'll get it for you. He slid along the polished floor and pulled the door open. It's a myth. Or do I mean a legend? He laughed suddenly. Or maybe I just made it up. Then he was gone. Col had saved Dominic Sampson's life and risked his own. Why? What had made him do such a thing? He couldn't find an answer to that one. In the quiet, Col almost drifted back to sleep, but he didn't dare, too afraid of the dark dreams that might come. Cleo came back in later, checking his drip, as beautiful as before. Can't you sleep? At last, with a struggle, Col found his voice. Dreams, bad dreams. The water, going under, not being able to get up. She stopped her ministrations and sat on the bed. It's understandable, Col. You've been through a major trauma. You almost died. You saved the boy's life. It's probably the most dramatic thing that's ever happened to you. Col nodded. So I suppose your subconscious has got to go over it again and again just to come to terms with it. She rubbed his hand gently. I had a baby 4 months ago, and that was the most dramatic thing that has ever happened to me. After the birth, every time I closed my eyes, I relived every moment. I couldn't get it out of my mind. But then it fades, and what you're left with is a beautiful baby, worth it all. It will fade for you too, Col. And what you'll have is the memory of the bravest thing anyone can ever do. Risk their own life to save someone else. She looked at him as if she thought he was wonderful. Had he really done anything so fearless? He didn't remember it like that. You're a real-life hero, Col, and I'm very proud to be your nurse. When she was gone, he closed his eyes, wanting desperately to sleep. When he did, finally, his sleep was deep and dreamless.